And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above, all the puerile, bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday, January 2nd. You know, it never fails. Like after a big holiday like Christmas, it takes a few days before you really are able to take stock of all of the news stories that happened before. And let's be honest, most people aren't paying that much attention to what's happening in the news. Too much stuff going on with family and Christmas and parties and all of that to really pay all that much attention to what's going on. But the holidays have passed, and now we've had a few days to digest everything. Now, of course, the last couple of days have been filled with, news of different, what I'm going to call terror attacks across the country. There was one in Las Vegas, and there was one in New Orleans. And, right now I've got the TV in the studio trained on Fox News, and they're going back and forth over the New Orleans incident. Now, one thing I noticed yesterday after the broadcast is that there was not a lot of coverage of the Cybertruck that exploded at Trump Tower in Las Vegas. Now, my guess is it happened kind of in the afternoon, and we were over at my parents' house, and you got one of those news headlines that flash across your phone, and we immediately turned on Fox News thinking that there would be a lot of coverage of it, but there really wasn't. It was all focused on New Orleans. Now the question is, are the two connected in any way? Well, let's just kind of take stock of the facts that we have. Both of them were, we're not talking about a sophisticated attack in either case, okay? In New Orleans, the guy rented a Ford truck and drove it into a crowd. It doesn't take a lot of planning or a lot of sophistication to do that. The other one, the Cybertruck, well, it was pretty clear that guy wasn't all that sophisticated either. The back of the truck was filled with fireworks mortars, some gas cans, some camping fuel, and a couple of other things. But it really wasn't planned out all that well. In fact, the Cybertruck, I read an article this morning that said that the Cybertruck contained the blast. All the doors were intact. They didn't blow off. Not even the glass of the front of the Trump Hotel was cracked or damaged in any way. So the Cybertruck pretty much contained the entire blast, which tells me that there really wasn't a lot of forethought to the bomb attack or the vehicle attack in Las Vegas. Now, let's look at the other one in New Orleans. It's pretty clear that guy was on social media and he had pledged allegiance to ISIS before the attack, and he had lots of videos on social media. So yeah, that one, if our law enforcement agencies had been operating at top notch, if the FBI was just as concerned with terror attacks as they are with tracking down people who were at January 6th, well, then we may have been able to get a handle on that guy. But it appears that we weren't able to do that. It was a failure of intelligence from at all levels. Now, I say that, but let's take an honest assessment of it. This guy was posting on social media, but he rented a truck and then drove it into a crowd. So I don't know that there was a lot that could be done in tracking down. I mean, it's not like he was building a sophisticated bomb and the authorities were able to track down all of the supplies that he used to make the bomb. And we had nothing like that. Yes, he rented a truck, and as it turns out, the truck and the Cybertruck that was used in Las Vegas were rented through the same app. But I mean, apps are nationwide, and I don't really think that you can ascribe any connection there, except to say that it's a coincidence. And, I don't really believe in coincidences, but in this case, yeah, kind of looks to be that way. Well, down in the stack of stuff, I've got an article. Geez, I don't know. It's somewhere down there in the stack, but we'll get to it. And it discusses, and you know what? Actually, let's hear. Here's one off of Fox News, and let's just kind of go into this one a little bit. The headline is New Orleans attack investigation continues for potential links between Bourbon Street and the Trump Hotel bombing. And I quote, authorities are investigating potential connections between Wednesday's truck attack in New Orleans and a Cybertruck bombing at the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas this week. The FBI has identified Shamsuddin Jabbar as the suspect who allegedly drove a truck into a New Orleans crowd before being killed in a shootout with police on Wednesday. Authorities are investigating a potential military connection between Jabbar and the Las Vegas suspect, who police have not yet identified. Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill told Fox News that there is evidence that Jabbar worked alongside accomplices to coordinate the attack. The FBI told Fox News later on Thursday that they no longer believe other suspects were involved in the attack, which killed at least 14 people and wounded dozens of others. Jabbar had posted videos to social media prior to his attack expressing allegiance to the Islamic State. Investigators say Jabbar rented the truck used in the attack on December 30th in Houston and then drove to New Orleans on December 31st. Quote, FBI special agents and our law enforcement partners are currently conducting a number of court-authorized search warrants in New Orleans and other states, the Bureau said in a statement. The FBI's evidence response team continues to process the crime scene to meticulously gather all relevant evidence. The FBI initially said it didn't believe that the driver acted alone, though it is now revised. It has revised that determination. Investigators found guns inside Jabbar's, as well as 2 IEDs inside coolers elsewhere in the French Quarter. The FBI says it obtained footage of Jabbar placing the 2 devices. So the attack in New Orleans was obviously a little bit better planned out. I mean, it seems to me. I mean, the guy constructed 2 different IEDs, placed them ahead of the attack, then got in his truck and drove it into a crowd in the early morning hours of New Year's Day. So anyway, I mean, I think that you've got 2 different people acting, separately. I don't see any evidence that they're acting together. I don't really see a lot of sophistication in the attack in Las Vegas, except to say the guy rented a Cybertruck. I don't know why he didn't just use his own vehicle. Maybe he didn't have one, but there'll be more details that are released later on that attack. But what we have right now is kind of slim pickings on the details and not a lot of information. Well, today, if you want to call in and be part of the program, the number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. If there's something you've got on your mind, if you want to talk about, go ahead and give me a call. The phone lines are open, and I'll go ahead and leave them open for the entire program. One more time, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. Chief Justice John Roberts has issued a warning on judicial independence, and he's done it weeks before the presidential inauguration. Now, normally, you don't see press releases come from the Supreme Court. They're, generally speaking, they issue decisions, and that's it. You really don't see that many Supreme Court justices giving interviews, though occasionally you'll see an interview with Clarence Thomas, and every once in a while you saw interviews with Antonin Scalia. But we're not talking like they were out in front of the press by any means. The Supreme Court traditionally is kind of a cloistered group, sort of private, and they just let their decisions speak for themselves. But John Roberts has issued a press release, and basically he's calling for public officials to, and this is shocking that we even have to have a reminder of this, but he's asking for public officials and law enforcement. Excuse me. He's asking for law enforcement officials to abide by the ruling of the courts. Now, to most of us, this sounds like pretty common sense stuff, right? The court makes a ruling, you have to follow it. We're a nation of laws, not a nation of men. And so, yeah, I mean, we should just kind of follow what the court says, whether we like it or not. But recently, definitely with the Biden administration, there's been a long series of court rulings that they've pretty much ignored. The most high profile of those would be the so-called student loan forgiveness rulings. The court says, no, you can't. The Biden administration does it anyway, or tries to do it anyway. But let's get to Roberts' announcement here. And I quote from Fox News. Supreme Court Justice John Roberts, or Chief Justice John Roberts, issued a warning on Tuesday that the U.S. must maintain judicial independence just weeks away from President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. Roberts explained his concerns in an annual report on the federal judiciary. Okay, so this was an annual report. Quote, "It is not in the nature of judicial work to make everyone happy." And this is John Roberts now. "Most cases have a winner and a loser. Every administration suffers defeats in the court system, sometimes in cases with major ramifications for executive or legislative power or other consequential topics," Roberts wrote in the 15-page report. "Nevertheless, for the past several decades, the decisions of the courts, popular or not, have been followed, and the nation has avoided the standoffs that plagued the 1950s and 1960s. However," and that's my emphasis there, "within the past few years, elected officials from across the political spectrum have raised the specter of open disregard for federal court rulings," Roberts said, without naming Trump, President Biden, or any specific lawmaker. "These dangerous suggestions," says Roberts, "however sporadic, must be soundly rejected. Judicial independence is worth preserving. As my late colleague Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote, an independent judiciary is, quote, essential to the rule of law in any land, yet it is vulnerable to assault. It can be shattered if a society law exists to serve, does not take care to assure its preservation. I urge all Americans to appreciate the inheritance from our founding generation and cherish its endurance," Roberts said. Now, Roberts also quoted Chief Justice Charles Evans Hughes, who remarked that the three branches of government must work in successful cooperation to make possible the effective functioning of the Department of Government, which it is designed to safeguard with judicial impartiality, independence, and in the interests of liberty. Our political system and economic strength depend on the rule of law," Roberts wrote. He is exactly right. As I mentioned earlier, we are a nation of laws, not a nation of men. And, the Democrats for the last couple of years, they have said that, no one is above the law. Nobody, and they always say this when they're referencing President Trump, no one is above the law. But when it comes to Joe Biden, the Democrats sing an entirely different tune. And actually, it's not just Joe Biden. It's all of the Democrats. Who could forget Chuck Schumer's famous statement he made at a rally right out front of the Supreme Court that Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, they're going to reap the whirlwind, is what Chuck Schumer said on the steps of the Supreme Court. Now, while I don't really know what reaping the whirlwind means, it's very clear the intent of Chuck Schumer, that he's going to use political power to try to influence the court. Well, if that is allowed to continue, then the independence of the Supreme Court goes away. That it's at the very least, it's minimized. We've seen attempts by the Democrats and folks on the left, the radicals, try to impugn the integrity of the court. They've tried to use politics to influence the decisions of various lawmakers. Most of the time, it's targeted towards Sam Alito or Clarence Thomas, the conservatives. Since there are more conservatives now, it's kind of a broad-based attack on conservatism, no matter who it is. But the Democrats and the left, they have decided to use politics to try to influence the court. There's been a push in Congress to try to set up some sort of judicial ethics law. There's also been talk of packing the court. Kamala Harris talked about this a lot. We haven't heard that much from Joe Biden on packing the court, but that's been, that's not outside of his wheelhouse. Democrats of all shades and colors, at one point or another, usually always talk about packing the court, the legacy of FDR. It's funny. Everybody says that the people on the left say that FDR was a great president. And, at first I thought, years ago, I used to think that, well, that's just ignorance. They don't know who FDR is. But since then, I've decided that absolutely the left knows who FDR is. They know what he tried to do to our country, and they know what his plans were. He was a radical leftist. You can look at his book written by, what was that guy's name? The title of the book is The Road We're Traveling. But it lays out the 10 things you have to do for socialism in this country. And I mean, and it's the same guy that came up with the term the New Deal. Democrats have always had the agenda of packing the court, changing the judiciary, forcing people to resign. They try to use politics to influence the independence of the judicial branch. Well, Justice John Roberts is saying, that's something that we have to absolutely avoid at all costs. And he's entirely right. We have to have 3 co-equal branches of government for this country to work. Well, we'll have more after the break. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. The program is only going to continue to expand. Make sure that you follow Cowboy State Politics live on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, on Rumble, and any other place that I can figure out how to broadcast it to. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. If there's something on your mind and you want to talk to me about it, go ahead and give me a call. In the latest no S Sherlock moment from the national media, Inspector General, 3 DOJ employees leaked info to hurt Trump before the election. I don't think that anybody is in denial that that actually happened. But the question is, why did Merrick Garland allow it to happen? Well, because Merrick Garland is an avowed leftist. He has been his entire career. And it's no wonder why Republicans made sure that he was not put on the Supreme Court. I mean, that was a big, huge controversy years ago when he was nominated by a Democrat politician, and Republicans said no for obvious reasons. And you need to look no further for evidence than how Merrick Garland has administered the Department of Justice. Here is just one more piece of evidence, and I quote from Breitbart this morning. The Department of Justice Inspector General released a report on Monday that revealed that 3 employees had leaked information to the media in an attempt to damage the electoral prospects of Donald Trump. No kidding. The IG report summary said, and I quote, the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General initiated an investigation after receiving allegations that actions by a litigating division were politically motivated and violated the DOJ policies regarding disclosing information about ongoing matters. The OIG investigation found that 3 then senior DOJ officials violated the DOJ's confidentiality and media contacts policy by leaking to selected reporters. Days before the election, non-public DOJ investigative information regarding ongoing DOJ, okay, on and on and on. Yeah, so the DOJ leaked information on Trump in an attempt to hurt his prospects in the election. Now, it's unclear what investigation was leaked or what the leaks were. The New York Post points to a letter by Senator Chuck Grassley that, in turn, refers to an article in the Washington Post in August that alleged that Trump was investigated for supposedly receiving $10 million from Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi during the 2016 race. Grassley wrote, quote, the reporting also refers to classified U.S. intelligence, indicating that the Justice Department and the FBI may have divulged classified information to the media. This appears to be yet another example of the Justice Department and the FBI leaking material. Of course they did. I mean, it was a whole of government attempt to prevent Donald Trump from winning the election. And it just tells you how many bad actors we have in the U.S. government bureaucracy. And it is at every level, from the DOJ, the FBI, that Looney Tune over in the Interior Department, education, all across the whole of American government. There are leftists that are entrenched in the bureaucracy. I mean, I know that conservatives get made fun of all the time for referring to the deep state, but this is exactly what we're talking about, that you have entrenched people that have been there for years, and they have a vested interest in their own careers, their own jobs, their own paychecks. So, of course, they're not going to want somebody in office. They're not going to want a new boss that's going to possibly eliminate their position. But that's exactly what's happening, and it's exactly why we need President Trump. Now, if you compare that to what's happening in the Wyoming legislature, I find a fascinating comparison that conservatives have really never been in control of any branch, any house in Wyoming government. It has always been the redcoats, that or the Democrats, when we're talking, historically. But there have been numerous attempts to try to thwart anything that the conservatives could possibly do. And one of those has been in the works for several years, and that is the budget. The budget is constructed in such a way that it's one giant Gordian knot that would take forever to untangle. And I've got an interview with Representative Scott Smith that I'm going to play on Saturday's edition of the podcast, in which he talks about it, how it is so complicated that it's very, very, very difficult to untangle any of it. And, our pal Ken Pendergraft once described it as this big knot that if you pull on one string, it's just going to tighten another string on the other end. And when you think that you've got something figured out, well, then you'll discover that there's another mechanism that's fixing what you already fixed. So it's a giant mechanical structure that has been built by redcoats in the event that conservatives ever take power. And if you look at the media is working in concert with the Democrats. Now, I don't know if they have club meetings or if they sit down in strategy sessions, but it's pretty clear that the media, the Cowboy, Wild Pile, the Pravda on the Platte, all of the big media apparati in Wyoming are trying their best to discount anything that conservatives are doing. And there has been a couple of articles though that I find interesting. I'll see if I can dig them up for tomorrow's program. But it's Rod Miller has a couple of them out. Well, they're in power. We ought to just see what they can do. It's clear that Wyoming voters sent us a message, and it's clear what they want done. So we ought to give the reins to them and see what happens. This is an attempt, in concert with all of the mechanisms that have been put in place by the Redcoats, to, in the end, hopefully show, and I'm talking about the Democrat strategy here, hopefully show that conservatives can't govern. That they just don't know what they're doing and they can't govern. And so you're going to have to elect the Redcoats again to straighten this whole mess out. And I think that you're going to see that narrative play out probably sooner rather than later. I would say it's going to happen well before the legislature is through with its 40-day general session. In my mind, it's going to be fascinating because you're already seeing traps being laid. And one of the biggest ones is in the Wyoming Senate. And, I and this program have taken a lot of flack because of it, but I've only been reporting what's actually happening. And that is that Redcoats have 7 of the 10 committees in the Wyoming Senate. Okay, conservatives have the president and the vice president, but the majority floor leader, the person who decides what hits the floor and what doesn't, she's been a leftist her entire time in the legislature. So what leads you to believe that she's going to turn over a new leaf? There are a number of bills that have already been filed for this upcoming session that are, at best, they're red herrings. Let me give you a great example. Senate file, I think it's 58. It's removing the sales tax on firearms. First, that bill has nothing to do with firearms, except to say that they're removing the sales tax off of buying guns and ammunition. So, yeah, I guess in that sense, it does have something to do with guns. But really, it's a tax bill. It's a tax bill that's not focusing on that big of a percentage of the state's revenue or the tax revenue that's generated by sales across the entire state. We're not talking about, petroleum products or groceries. Of course, we don't tax groceries either, but we're not talking about a big part of the budget. It's actually pretty small. What it is an attempt for the Redcoats to say, look at us. We love the Second Amendment. We took taxes off of guns. Okay, great. But it doesn't expand anyone's Second Amendment rights. It doesn't add to the SAPA law. It doesn't add to Stand Your Ground or any of those measures that have already been passed. It literally does nothing for the Second Amendment except save you a couple bucks when you buy it. And but it's just an attempt that they're going to use in the next election to say, look at us, we passed this great bill. And let me tell you what their plan is for the Wyoming House. That bill will most likely make it through the Senate. And they're going to force conservatives to kill it because it is a bad bill. It's picking winners and losers. Hooray for the left, finally figuring out that they don't have to have all these taxes. Good job, guys. But you could have picked a bigger tax to get rid of, say, the lodging tax. But anyway, the plan is to send that sucker over to the House of Representatives and make the conservatives kill it. And the whole point is so that they can paint conservatives as not being pro-Second Amendment. But everything, just about everything they're doing is a complete setup. And I hope conservatives see it for what it is, because, it's pretty easy to tell what they're doing. The Redcoats are not in the majority anymore, though the Senate is kind of split down the middle. Certainly, but in the House, definitely the conservatives are in charge. So there's a lot of subterfuge that's going on. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that, I guess maybe it's always there, but it's more up front now because the Democrats and the Redcoats have to try to take power again. We'll have more after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by freedomgoldusa.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, documented to be almost always right 98.9% of the time. Doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call, and we'll talk about whatever's on your mind. Now, yesterday, I started by giving you the top stories of 2024. And, I mean, this time of year, you're going to have all sorts of lists. You know, the top 10 movies of 2024 and the top 10 songs. But really, we need to look back at the top stories, news stories of the year. Now, yesterday, I kind of took the New York Times and the Washington Post and all of those stories. ABC News, I think there was a couple of them on there. But the Blaze, and specifically Steve Deace, and if you don't pay attention to the Blaze, he's one of their talking heads on there. But he's got his top 10 list of stories of 2024. Number 10, Adventures in Scamdemia. Now, if you remember last January, in fact, a year ago today, Harvard President Claudine Gay resigned after journalist Christopher Rufo exposed her as a plagiarist. His investigation revealed that Gay used a number of uncited sources in her doctoral thesis. And that scandal, it seemed to go on for weeks with Claudine Gay, and there was a whole bunch of other people at the top of American universities that took a lot of heat. And a lot of it had to do with all of the anti-Israel protests that were happening on campus. But the big one was Claudine Gay stepping down because she's a plagiarist, just like Cyrus Western. That's a story from this past year in Wyoming that, I don't know, I don't think it got enough play. But Cyrus Western plagiarized Lyndon Baines Johnson on the floor of the House of Representatives. It was crazy, man. He gave this ridiculously sappy speech. And I looked at the people sitting next to me and I'm like, there's no way that he wrote that. No way did he come up with this ridiculous speech. And we started Googling different parts of the speech. And sure enough, he plagiarized Lyndon Baines Johnson. Number 9 on the Blaze's list of the top stories, and this one should be on the top of everybody's list. America still likes baby killing, but... And I quote, while 2023 saw some extremely disappointing developments for the cause of life, 2024 was sort of a mixed bag. Florida's Kill 'Em All amendment was defeated along with similar amendments in Nebraska, South Dakota, but unfortunately, pro-baby killing amendments in places like Arizona, Montana, and Missouri all passed. So sort of a mixed bag. There were places in the country that stood up for life. And one of those was not Wyoming. Judge Melissa Owens struck down Wyoming's abortion bans. Fortunately, the folks in the legislature that are pro-life, they're not going to stop. They're not going to allow Melissa Owens, a judge, an unelected judge, to dictate policy for the state. And there will be more attempts. Number 8, Real America, forgotten, abused, and gaslit. And I quote, 2024 was the year of lying and gaslighting. One, every time an economic report was released this year, it was not exactly good, but maybe plausible with the correct spin. However, in a month's time, the revised numbers were published, showing the economy wasn't nearly as rosy as the previous numbers indicated. The best one of those was the FBI's crime report. The Democrats touted all over the place. Well, crime is down. Crime is down under the Biden administration. We're doing a bang up job. Well, when the revised numbers came out, it turns out that actually none of that was true. Number two, when Hurricane Helene hit Florida and ravaged its way up the coast in 6 states, FEMA and other federal emergency organizations were and are seemingly nowhere to be found. However, when speculation that the absence of aid was politically motivated, we were told repeatedly that notion was hogwash. That is, until a report from the Daily Wire revealed that a FEMA official ordered workers to skip houses with Trump signs. The cycle of lying and gaslighting was on wash, rinse, and repeat all year long with the Democrats. Number 7, trans ain't going away. Although Caitlin Clark set new heights for female athletics and became an icon, the realm of women's sports was still tainted by the fact that several biological men posing as women were permitted to compete in women's athletic leagues this year. One of those individuals, a San Jose volleyball player, Blair Fleming, who played all season for the Spartans, prompting several of their opponents to forfeit matches in protest, says McIntyre. The University of Wyoming's volleyball team forfeited 2 matches with San Jose State, saying that they weren't going to play against that team simply because they had a man on a woman's team. Number 6, I'm putting together a team. Unlike his cabinet picks from 2016, which included John backstabbing Kelly and James tranning-loving Mattis, this time around, the older and wiser Trump has tapped a number of excellent people to fill his cabinet, from Tulsi Gabbard to Kash Patel and Pete Hegseth to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., among others. Trump's second term is bound to look a little bit different. Number 5, so long, Sleepy Joe. A month after special counsel Robert Hur's investigation into Biden's alleged improper retention of classified records concluded with no recommendation of criminal charges, as Biden was a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Biden dropped out of the presidential race following his disastrous debate. 2 days before the debate, June 25th, CNN runs a headline saying it's right-wing conspiracy with fake videos that Biden's mentally unfit. Well, it didn't really take too long after the debate. And here's the bizarre thing, that the Democrats, if you believe that the Democrats actually thought that Joe Biden could defeat Donald Trump. That was a setup from the word go. Everybody knew that Joe Biden was not going to be able to run for a second term. And if he did win, they'd probably have to use the 25th Amendment to replace him. So the whole debate performance, that thing was a setup from the word go to expose Biden for who he is. And then, of course, after the debate, the Democrats could say, oh, we didn't know. We had no idea that he was as bad off as he is. Well, yeah, it was. He was and is as bad off as that. Number 4, illegal immigration and the murder of Laken Riley. We cannot forget this one. The most conservative estimates from our government's own data put the number of illegals who have come into this country during the Biden administration at over 7.2 million people. The real number, significantly higher, probably. Let's see here. Number 3 on the list of big stories from 2024, lawfare. Every type and way they tried to drag President Trump into court, they did, and with pretty successful results. In 2024, Donald Trump faced an extensive array of unfair legal challenges. Those include the New York hush money case, which he was convicted of 34 felony counts for creating an NDA with somebody, which is entirely legal. The classified documents case, during which he was indicted on 37 counts. The election interference case, which he faced numerous federal charges. And the Fulton County, Georgia case, which is now in the crapper as well, in which Trump and others were charged with under the RICO Act. On top of that, he faced a bevy of civil lawsuits, including a significant fraud case by New York Attorney General Letitia James. Further, there were various efforts to disqualify him from the ballot, like in Colorado, which removed him from the ballot before they were smacked down by the Supreme Court. These cases collectively, all of them ranging in validity from specious to malicious, added up for a year of lawfare. Number 2 on the list, and this one, in my mind, this ought to be number 1, except for the election. I mean, I guess maybe it's a toss-up, but number 2, they tried to kill him twice, and they're not done, my friends. In a shocking but not so surprising turn of events, at a Donald Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, an assassination attempt rocked the nation on July 13th. But and perhaps the bigger headline here, or the parallel or companion headline here, is that the media tried to downplay it. Somebody almost assassinated a former president of the United States and a guy who would eventually win the presidency. And that's not big news for months. That's not 3-inch headlines above the fold. It was absolutely disgraceful how the media treated this event. I mean, it was, I remember the lovely Christine and I were at home, and I walked out. No, I mean, lovely Christine was doing something. I walked over and said, they just tried to kill the president. And of course, we were glued to the TV afterwards. But this should have been headline news for weeks. And what do we know about the shooter? Still, we don't really know all that much about the guy who tried to kill Donald Trump. We don't really know that much about the second guy that tried to kill Donald Trump. So this is a coordinated effort by the deep state to try to hide these guys, to obfuscate the real truth that maybe the Democrats were involved. I think certainly some of them were, though I don't have any proof of that. I mean, I think it's just common sense, right? The Democrats are trying everything, and when all of their lawfare failed, what were they left to do? Well, they're going to have to try to kill him, which they attempted to do. And number 1 on the list, Donald Trump wins again. Not only did he win the Electoral College, he won the popular vote. And that's really all that needs to be said. Donald Trump won again. It's I think that this bodes very, very well. And you know what? I think that we ought to have a little bit of celebration. I mean, it is the 2nd of January. We got a new year. Trump's going to be the president, and we should just absolutely celebrate. Okay. As much as I love the 1812 overture, that's enough of that. But think about it. After all the things that we went through in 2024, we have a lot to look forward to. Just imagine, and we were over at my parents' house yesterday for dinner, and the topic of conversation was, we wonder how high the stack of executive orders are going to be, reversing everything that Joe Biden did through executive order. I mean, on day 1, Biden signed, I don't know, it was like 100 executive orders. I mean, it was a giant stack. I don't exactly know the accurate number on it, but it was a huge number of executive orders. Everything from canceling the Keystone Pipeline to, electric cars and solar panels and you name it. Well, all of those things can be and probably will be reversed on day 1. I think Donald Trump is probably going to go directly from the steps of the Capitol to the Oval Office, pick up his pen, and start signing. At least that's what I'm expecting him to do. And I think that listening to everything that he said during the campaign, I think we can all expect that that's absolutely what he is going to do and what he should do. Biden really screwed up this country, and I don't think that a lot of people really understand the depth of how many things the Biden administration actually did. I mean, they buried this country in regulation. And a good example is the Rock Springs RMP. The BLM finally came out with their latest response to Governor Gordon, and basically it said, well, this claim is inconsistent with this Biden executive order and this executive order and this executive order, so we're going to do it anyway. Well, hopefully Donald Trump gets in there, rescinds all of those executive orders and asks the Congress to completely trash that resource management plan down in Rock Springs. I mean, I'm sure Representative Hageman will be pushing for that, as she rightly should. Well, let's go ahead and take another break.
So what's happened
Whoa,
in these states?
That's Steve Harshman there. All right. So we'll go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll go ahead and finish up. I've got a crazy story. The New York City government, or New York mayor, and the governor say that crime is down. Yeah. After somebody was lit on fire in the subway, crime is definitely down. Anyway, we'll come back with more after the break. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble. It's almost like I'm omnipresent, my friends, as I should be. Sitting atop the Wyoming media is a really hard job, actually reporting the truth. And you know what? It's not really that hard. All you got to do is tell the truth. Expose who is trying to obfuscate things. And, that's one of the reasons why I go down to Cheyenne during every session. So I'm right there, right in the middle of things. I can catch what is said, record it, and bring it to you. And, it's like I said, all I got to do is report the truth. It's not that hard of a job, though. It's amazing the alleged journalistic gymnastics that the Wyoming media goes through during the legislative session to try to convince you of things that aren't true. And I am absolutely excited to see what they're going to write about this legislative session. It's going to be absolutely incredible. I said that we're going to go to this whole crime is down thing in New York, but I remembered that I had another piece in the stack of stuff about the highest paid government employees. And since we're talking about, President Trump cleaning out the federal government and the DOGE department, the Department of Government Efficiency, I found this piece on zerohedge.com, and it's entitled, "These are the U.S. government agencies with the highest paid employees." This list, you're going to love it. And I quote, and again, this is on zerohedge.com if you want to go look at it. "Today, some of the highest paid U.S. federal agencies are financial regulators overseeing multi-trillion-dollar asset markets. while the median pay for the federal worker is $99,000 a year. Wide variations exist across the 438 agencies and sub-agencies. Employees at the Commodities Future Trading Commission have a median wage of $247,518, while employees working for Veterans Affairs and the Treasury Department are paid among the lowest. Now, there's a couple of graphs on this article. And if you're watching on the Ditto Cam, here's what one of them looks like. Again, this article is on zerohedge.com. You can go look at it for yourself. But the top, since we're talking about lists of 2024, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission has the highest median salary in the entire U.S. government at $247,500, and there are 736 employees that work there. The Farm Credit System Insurance Corporation, they only have 10 employees, and they are paid a median wage of $242,000 a year. The SEC, $227,000. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, $198,000. Intellectual Property Enforcement, $195,000. And then on the bottom is Civil Rights Cold Case Review Board at $183,000 a year. Now, all of these are financial sector positions. Oh, here's a great one. You'll love this one. The Arctic Research Commission. The median wage in that outfit is $191,000. Almost $200,000 to do some research in the Arctic. Fascinating. Now, the other graphic, and again, this is just your 2024 list, and I guess we could chalk this one up to government inefficiency. But listen to the top 10 lowest paid government outfits, and then we'll compare those to the guys on the higher end of the pay scale. Listen to this. So the Armed Forces Retirement Home, the average salary or the median salary is $60,000. The Economic Advisors Council, $64,000. The International Boundary and Water Commission, $70,000. Treasury Department, $76,000. Agriculture, $77,000. The SBA, $80,000. The BLM, the Interior Department, $87,000. The Veterans Affairs Department, that's a pretty important one, $89,000. And the Navajo and Hopi Indian Relocation Office, $89,318. Well, those, and if you think about it, like the Treasury, Veterans Affairs, Small Business Administration, Agriculture, those are all pretty big departments. And when you compare them to these other financial outfits, like the Arctic Research Commission at $191,000, it seems to me that the pay scale is absolutely upside down. And frankly, I don't think that government employees should be making $200,000 a year. Now, maybe if you add in the cost of living in Washington, D.C., maybe that justifies it. But still, when you're making almost 2.5 times what the average salary of the average American is working in government, that's absolutely ridiculous. Government service was never set up. It was never supposed to be a place where you can get rich, where you can make a ton of money. It was just that service, that you enter public service to do that, and you're not going to get rich. And the fact is, it used to be that nobody really wanted to work for the government because, low pay, crappy hours. But if you had that in your heart, sure, go for it. And the idea was that if you really wanted to get rich, you should go work in the private sector, in the free market, allow the free market to work. But we've kind of upended that. And there is no better example than in Wyoming. The highest paid government official in the state of Wyoming is the UW football coach. He makes over $1 million a year. He makes more than the governor. Makes more than Governor Mark Gordon. And there are state employees that make a tremendous amount of money, way over and above what their private sector counterparts make. And I would be the first to admit that I don't think that teachers are paid enough in this state. But their counterparts in the administration, they're just paid way, way, way too much. There's a great report out. It's called the CREW Report, CRERW. In fact, I'll try to remember to put a link to it on cowboystatepolitics.com so you can look through it. But it'll tell you what every single person working in Wyoming education makes, all the way from the janitor to the superintendent of schools. And in smaller school districts, this is how specific it is. If you know who is working in the school and what their position is, you can find out what they pay or what they make. And that's benefits included. And some of those numbers in there will absolutely blow the top of your head off. Now, we don't have the 2024 numbers out yet, but as of last year, we spent $19,900 per student. That's in the crew report. That's last year's number. And so you can probably bet that this year it's going to be over $20,000 per student. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of that money does not go to teachers and it does not go to the student. Rather, it stays with administration. And, there are some school districts like Sheridan. There are 3 school districts in Sheridan. In Fremont County is the worst. I think they have 8 different school districts. And all of them have superintendents. All of them have superintendent staffs. All of them have secretaries. All of them have fringe benefits. But when you compare that to bigger counties, population-wise, not size-wise, like Natrona has 1 school district, and they seem to function just fine. Now, I'm not saying they're not paying their administration really high wages, because they absolutely are. I'm just saying they have 1, where in Sheridan, there's 3 of them. Fremont County, there's 8. Other counties have multiple school districts when there's absolutely no need. And if you do some analysis in the crew report, you'll find out that over the past, 3, 4, 5 years, enrollment in Wyoming schools has actually gone down. And it's been a year since I looked at this, but that enrollment had gone down about 2,000 students. But during that same time period, administration and staff went up 3,600 positions. So we have fewer students, but we have more administration. That's absolutely backwards. What we ought to be able to do, what we ought to be doing, is minimize as much as we can the administration and staff and provide a better value to our students. And if you compare Wyoming schools to South Dakota, their test scores rank several places above Wyoming. And by the way, Wyoming is almost always in the middle, like number 25 or number 26 nationally. South Dakota, they're always a couple of steps above Wyoming, and they spend more than half, or they spend half as much as Wyoming does. I think the last figure I looked at, they were spending like $9,000 or $10,000 a student, where Wyoming is spending $20,000. So don't tell me that more money equals a better education. It just absolutely doesn't. Now there is a lawsuit going on from the teachers union, and I haven't heard any updates on that. But they're claiming that Wyoming doesn't fund schools according to its constitutional mandates, and I don't see how that is humanly possible when they're paying when Wyoming's like number 1 or number 2 that what we pay per student. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot of things that are upside down, both at the national level and at the state level. And you need no more evidence in Wyoming than to look at the governor's supplemental budget. The governor says himself that a supplemental budget is only for emergency or unforeseen circumstances. That's listed in his letter. He wrote it. And yet, when you go through the budget, there's a whole bunch of different stuff that is neither unforeseen nor emergency, like a $36 million shooting range at the Law Enforcement Academy. Now, I absolutely think that the Law Enforcement Academy needs a shooting range. I do want police to be able to be expert marksmen, but they don't need $36 million to do it. There are a lot of people that go to the shooting range it wasn't $36 million, and they're expert marksmen. I see no reason why we have to spend that amount of money at the Law Enforcement Academy. And considering when the legislature approved a world-class shooting complex, and I think they decided to put it south of Cody, and that one's only expected to be $15 million. So more than half as much as this request from the governor. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's money for Sheridan College in there, security upgrades at the prison. Maybe those are necessary, but they're certainly not unforeseen. But there's a lot of stuff in that 2-inch thick budget that we absolutely don't need. So when you look at, and I guess, even though I kind of felt like I was getting off topic, I guess I didn't. But when you compare the salaries and the spending at the federal level, and compare that to what's happening here in the state of Wyoming, it's almost analogous that we are upside down with what we're paying government employees versus the private sector. We spend too much money, and a lot of that money does not go back to the student. Well, we've burned through a busy Thursday morning on Cowboy State Politics Live. Thank you for listening. Make sure that you stay tuned, and we'll be back tomorrow with more news and Open Line Friday. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.